Hello and welcome to this training session on the Introduction to Teaching BTEC Level 3 Business. My name's Charlotte Rowett and I'm going to be delivering all of your training today. The objectives of today's training is to understand the main features of the International Level 3 qualification. We're going to look at how to plan a successful BTEC program, how to write and deliver engaging assessments, and how to quality assure the qualification. First of all, let's have a look at successful BTEC delivery. We need to, first of all, look at the basics and the key differences between BTECs and other academic curriculum. All of BTEC qualifications are modular and consist of units, and the amount of units that you choose depends on the size of qualification that you are delivering within your centre. All the BTEC qualifications consist of mandatory units plus optional units, and the amount of optional units, again, depends on the size of qualification you have chosen to deliver. All of the BTEC units are assessed separately, and at the end of the programme, the unit grades are combined to create a qualification grade. Let's have a look at the overview of the BTEC teaching assessment and quality assurance. So every BTEC has a specification, and within the specification, it outlines what the learners need to be able to know and be able to do. Learners are assessed two ways on the International Level 3 programmes, and that's either using Pearson set assignments or authorised assignment briefs, which can be adapted by the centre. But the qualification is 100% internally assessed, and they're assessed against the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria within the specification. Once the work has been assessed, then a sample is internally verified by another member of staff to check that the standards are being met. Pearson will engage with you at least once a year to standards verify the work, and this is your external scrutiny of the programme, and that's to confirm that the standards are being met. Providing that there's been no compliance issues with your centre, you can then claim certificates for the learners that have successfully completed the programme over the duration of time that they have been with you. You can see from this diagram how the Level 3 qualification looks against other Level 3 qualifications that you may currently be delivering. And you can see here the different sizes of qualification. So the smallest size at Level 3 is the certificate, which is the equivalent of one international AS level with 180 guided learning hours. And that goes all the way up to the extended diploma, which is the equivalent of 3 international A levels at 1,080 guided learning hours. Within the specification, you'll be able to find vital information on the structure of qualification, how to assess each of the units, how to make your grading decisions, and internal verification assistance. And the specification should be a document that you're using on a daily basis. Within the specification, you can see some essential sections that will help you to deliver the programme. So there'll be guidance on how many learning hours are needed for your size of qualification and the unit that you're delivering. There's guidance on the amount of units required for your size of qualification. Guidance on the content and the assessment methods for each of the units. Once you've decided which units you are delivering, you then need to think about how you are going to structure your BTEC over the duration of time that the learners are on programme. You may decide that some of the units need to be delivered in a more compressed way over a shorter period of time, where some units may be delivered over an extended period of time due to the nature of the content and the assessment. There is some freedom in how you deliver your BTEC qualification and what works best for you. The units do not need to be delivered in numerical order. They can be delivered in whatever order you want, as long as you are delivering the correct amount of units needed for your size of qualification. When you are structuring your BTEC, you also need to take into account internal verification and standards verification, because that needs to be planned in advance. Within the specification, you can also get to know a lot more about each of the individual units. Within each of the units, you will find the learning aims, and they are normally split into 3 or 4 per unit. You'll also find the content, and the content is what needs to be delivered to your learners. We do not specify how you deliver the content. That's entirely up to you, and it does not all need to be in traditional classroom settings where that content is delivered. You might deliver the content via homework, guest speakers, work experience, visits, etc. You'll also find the assessment criteria related to each of the learning aims, and the assessment criteria is always pass, merit, or distinction. Within the specification, there is also assistance around grading and what to look for in the learner's work when making those grading decisions. There's also assessment and internal verification sections looking at administrative arrangements and how those internal assessments should or could take place. There's also some further information found within each of the unit specifications on resource requirements for that unit, links to other units that you may or may not be delivering, and employer involvement. Let's look at the units with Pearson set assessments on this level 3 qualification in business. So each assessment is set by Pearson to maintain standardization across the world, and there are 2 available for each 1-year period per unit. Each of those Pearson set assessments has guidance for exam conditions, timings, and supervision, but they are not mandatory. They are merely guidance. Learners must complete the authorised Pearson set assignments for units 2, 6, and 7, dependent on the size of your qualification, and you do not write the assignment briefs for these units. Pearson set assignments are subject to mandatory standards verification for at least 1 per year. Internal verification of the Pearson set assignment briefs is not necessary because they have been written by Pearson and you are making no changes to them. However, internal verification of the assessment decisions is necessary. There will be 2 Pearson set assignments per unit available to you, and a resit is allowed on Pearson set assignments. Pearson set assignments can be completed at any time of the year during the period that the learners are on programme, but some of the Pearson set assignments are designed to be taken on. And in particular, Unit 7 on the Level 3 qualification is about business decision making, and therefore the learners need to have enough experience, knowledge, and confidence in order to embark on that assessment. Using one of the Pearson set assessments for your subject area, consider the following. What units are mandatory for your size of qualification? Which order of units should I deliver and when? And also consider why you think that that is best. When should you plan for Pearson set assessments to be completed? And again, why? And how are you going to prepare your learners for this type of assessment? Please press pause now to complete this activity and press play once completed. Let's now look at creating engaging sessions. Delivery should reflect the learning aim and the type of content being delivered. And there's some helpful resources available to you via the Pearson website that include a delivery plan and a scheme of work that will help you to plan a schedule of lessons, and also a delivery guide that will help you to structure a unit. There's also some additional tips of how to deliver the content, and that's identifying key mandatory content in the unit. You will always have access to what the assessment is going to be for each of the units, and that might guide you in the teaching and learning stages beforehand. You need to structure your delivery to help the learners develop their skills. That's combining initial knowledge delivery with initial skills delivery, and then increasing complexity throughout the delivery of that unit. Be aware of the assessment and that the learners need to be able to respond on completion of the unit. So, for example, if the learners need to complete a presentation or a professional report, that they have practiced that beforehand. Building some formative assessments that combine the knowledge and skills element before you embark on the assessment for real. BTEC qualifications are vocational in their nature, and we need to reflect this in our teaching and learning. And we need to make sure that the learners have a really good understanding of what's going on in the world of business. So can we build external links that will help us to teach the content? Can we use live client briefs or case studies? Can we get our learners to complete work experience or go out on visits? Can we invite guest speakers into the classroom? But at all times, can we encourage active learning? We also need to consider whether the learners are given every opportunity to access the possible grading criteria within a task. And in order to be able to do that, they need to understand the command verb and the requirements. So does the command verb say explain, evaluate, compare, analyze, for example? And do the learners know what those words mean and what they need to do in response to them? Do the learners understand the evidence that they need to provide for a task? So is it a presentation and what does that involve? Is it a professional report and do they know how to lay that out? But the learners need to have the opportunity to meet all of the grading criteria within a learning aim. Using a unit from your specification, consider the following. How can you reflect the industry and promote vocational learning in your lessons? What potential external links could you build? And what types of evidence would you ask your learners to produce? Please press pause now to complete this activity and press play once completed. Let's now look at the other type of assessment that takes place on the BTEC Level 3, and that's authorised assignment briefs. For the first year of delivery, all centres must use authorised assignment briefs for the internal assessments. However, these assignment briefs have been prepared by subject experts so that they can be used across all of our Level 3 units across the world. So there is still the ability to make some adaptations and changes to these authorised assignment briefs. So you may want to choose a business or an area of business as the focus for the assessment tasks. You may want to amend the evidence requirements, and that depends on the needs of your learners. And you may want to adapt the resource recommendations so that they are more in keeping with the region that you find yourself in. These are available for all of the internally assessed units, but these are not Pearson set assignments. So Pearson set assignments are just for units 2, 6, and 7. All of the other assessments are internally assessed. So using an authorised assignment brief of your choice, consider the following. Is the scenario or task appropriate for your centre and your learners? And if not, what changes could you make? Will the evidence being asked for get the best from your learners, or are there alternatives you could use? Press pause now to complete this activity and press play once completed. All of our units are assessed in these two ways, Pearson set assessments and authorised assignment briefs. However, there are some internal assessment rules that apply to all of the units. The lead internal verifier or programme manager may grant the learner an opportunity to resubmit assessment evidence for an assignment with all the grades still available, and they would be given up to 15 working days in which to do this. But this can only be granted if the learner has submitted their assessment evidence by the deadline date. Is the work authenticated as being original by the learner and by the assessor? And has the assessor judged that the learner can independently improve their assessment evidence? Let's now look at the internal verification of assessment decisions. Pearson's role is to check that the learners receive the grades that they have earned whilst being on programme with you, but we ask you to do some jobs that will help us to do that completion. The basics around internal verification is that it's a centre-based quality assurance system, and that's to ensure that the assignment briefs are fit for purpose and the assessment decisions are accurate. Internal verification needs to be undertaken by subject specialists in your centre, and it involves the assessor and the internal verifier, but not the learners. It should support the assessor in terms of compliance with the qualification, but also for continuous improvement. But it is not a tick box exercise. Let's look at some of the roles and responsibilities around internal verification. So the first person we need to look at is the assessor, sometimes known as the teacher or tutor. And they're responsible for the teaching of the unit, using that unit specification as guidance. They're also responsible for generating the assignment briefs, whether that be a Pearson set assignment or an authorised assignment brief. They're also responsible for accurately assessing the learner's assessment evidence using the specification and the relevant assessment criteria and learning aims in order to do that. And they're responsible for generating and recording accurate learner feedback and their achievement. The internal verifier is responsible for checking that the assignment briefs are fit for purpose, and that must take place before the assignment briefs are handed out to the learners. They're also responsible for checking that the assessor has accurately assessed the learner's assessment evidence, and this is done by sampling. This must take place before the learners are given their final grades. The internal verifier is also responsible for generating and recording their findings, providing feedback to the assessor, and ensuring that any remedial actions have been carried out. The lead internal verifier or programme manager is responsible for the standardisation of assessors and internal verifiers so that they all know how to interpret the assessment requirements in a unit specification. So that's looking at the assessment criteria and the essential information for assessment decisions. Can the team write a fit for purpose assignment brief or make amendments to an authorised one? Can they accurately assess the learner's assessment evidence? And can the team complete the necessary auditable forms? And it may be that the lead internal verifier sets some time aside across the academic year to practice some of these skills. But the lead internal verifier is responsible for overseeing the quality assurance of the assessment for the whole of the programme. Internal verification needs to be rigorous in its approach, and it needs to conform to a centre-wide process. So if you have other BTEC qualifications happening in your centre, so perhaps other subject areas, you need to be internally verifying to the same standard. Internal verification needs to be systematically planned and managed by the centre, and this should be done in advance. You should be planning when your internal verification is going to be taking place throughout the academic year. It needs to be well administered, and all of the documentation should be completed in full and signed and dated. Internal verification needs to be carried out in a timely manner. As mentioned, All of the assignment briefs must be checked before they are handed out to the learners, and all of the assessment decisions must be checked before the final grades are given to the learners. The whole process should be monitored, and it should inform continuous improvement so that the learners are getting the best experience from your centre. It needs to be supportive and non-threatening, but it does need to be taken seriously, otherwise it doesn't fulfill its function. You can see here a visual representation of the document that must be completed when you are internally verifying an assignment brief. The checks that you need to be making are, does it have accurate unit and program details on the assignment brief? Are there clear deadlines for the assessment, so issue and submission dates must be specified? Does it include a suitable vocational scenario? Does it accurately indicate the assessment criteria being targeted by the task? Does it offer a full opportunity for the learners to generate appropriate and sufficient evidence? Does it clearly state the forms of evidence required? And does it have a clear presentation format? If you're using an authorised assignment brief, a lot of these checks have already been done for you, but the more changes you make to an authorised assignment brief, the more checks you are going to have to complete. But this document needs to be signed and dated before the assignment brief can be given out to the learners. Stage 2 of internal verification is when you sample the assessment decisions for each assignment that has been issued to each cohort of learners. This is to ensure that the assessor's decisions are accurate when judged against the assessment requirements found within the specification. Are the assessor's decisions consistent when judged against the assessment requirements of the specification? Is there summative feedback for the assessor justifying why the criteria has or has not been awarded? Have the assessment rules been followed in terms of submissions and resubmissions? Is there evidence of collusion or plagiarism in the learner's assessment evidence? And you would complete this document before any of the final grades have been given to the learners. When you're looking at sample sizes, you need to choose a sample and consider as a minimum whether the program is new or established. A new program poses more of a risk of getting things wrong, and therefore your sample size needs to be greater. You need to consider whether the assessor is new to BTEC or the unit, and if they are, again, they pose more of a risk of getting things wrong, and your sample size needs to be higher. You need to look at the size of your cohort. If you've got a particularly large group of learners on program, your sample size needs to reflect this. You need to look at the profile of the grades being awarded. Has the assessor graded some learners at pass, some at merit, and some at distinction? And if they have, you need to see a sample across those grading decisions. Consider the forms of evidence that have been generated by the learners, and is there more risk involved with them? If there is, then the sample size needs to be impacted by that. Have there been any known issues over time, for example, staff changes throughout the year, or learner complaints related to grading, or any Pearson standards verification feedback that may alter your sample sizes? Other factors could include the number of assessors for one unit or cohort, and where the location is of your learners completing their qualification. Further support and resources are available to you. So you have a dedicated subject advisor, and his contact details can be found on the main business landing page within the Pearson website. There's some blended learning digital ebooks, which we'll look at in a second. There's also some textbooks, and there's the Learning Hub, which includes the Progress platform. Here you can see what the student resources or ebooks may look like. You can see that there is a teacher dashboard, and that reviews whether the students have accessed the materials that you have set for them. There's also student access that will help them to get online using either mobile or desktop apps. There's also a dashboard of resources that you can use as part of your teaching, but there's some student activities which can be used as homework activities or blended learning activities. Thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed this training.